Today we're going to uncover the shocking truth behind one of the biggest misconceptions in all of dog training. And we're going to talk about how this one thing, in many ways, has held back dog training for generations. Wonder what we have here. PupBox stands out because they customize the box for your dog's age. Have you guys seen these? I already have one out that the dogs have been using. They found a way to simulate like chewing on a bone with this nylon wood material. It's tough, but it's not so tough that there isn't some give. So you don't get those sharp splinters and the things that make chewing on bones risky. Look at this, chicken and blueberries. How do they make chicken and blueberries look so appetizing together? Don't they? PupBoxes aren't just for puppies. They follow your dog through all 4 life stages. We have a young pup and a grown pup. My favorite thing about a good plush toy is that it has multiple textures. And I bet there's a squeaker. There it is. Do I know dog toys or what? And I'm pretty sure that's 100% accurate whale sound too. This is from Loving Pets. Like, this is a medium lasting chew. Chews like this are a great thing for separation anxiety sometimes. You get lots of high value rewards here. And my favorite part is that PupBox provides you with evidence-based dog training advice. You get this nice card with lots of great advice, double-sided too. If you want to try this, you can get 50% off your first box. PupBox.com/Zak. I'll have the link in the description of this video. In a recent video, we had a discussion as to whether or not aversion or physical corrections perceived as unpleasant by dogs are necessary as part of our regular dog training. There is a scientific consensus on this matter, even though we dog trainers, who are mostly not scientists, are divided on this. We've established in our last several videos, including that one, how much misinformation there actually is in dog training. I'm gonna have that link in the description. Highly recommend that you check that out as a prerequisite to this video. The spoiler is that it's not even close to controversial that using aversion in dog training is unnecessary. I know that this is something that a lot of you have strong opinions about because it was the #1 comment on our recent dog training crisis video. It's not an understatement to say there's a full-on crisis in dog training right now. And if I'm being straight with you, we are tired of just standing by watching the public be misinformed en masse. One comment that I couldn't help but see dozens of times was basically something like this: what about mother dogs teaching their puppies by physically correcting them? Or what about dog-to-dog communication, which involves one dog being physically unpleasant to another dog with the aim of guiding their future behavior? And the question would basically be, isn't that natural, and shouldn't we emulate that dog-to-dog behavior and adapt it for our use? So today I want to talk about that. Do the harsher ways that dogs sometimes communicate with each other in nature provide a valid rationale for the use of aversive punishments in dog training by humans? I asked my audience this very question just yesterday. We have 3,400 votes at the time of recording this video, and 17% selected true. That's statistically significant by a pretty significant margin. That's why we really need to talk about this, because remember, if we're building something, we want to make sure that we're building our dog training ideas on top of true hypotheses. And after all, I mean, if dogs do behave this way and are physically corrected or punished by one another, and that alters their behavior, maybe we have something to learn from this. I mean, the truth is, dogs do have a natural form of communication and behavior. And we study that and we attempt to understand that through the science of animal behavior. Dogs use body language and vocalizations to communicate with each other all the time. Generally, physical aggressive interactions aren't a regular part of this communication. Keep in mind that most physical or tactile communication between dogs does not rise to the level of aggressive behavior. I mean, dogs will sometimes use aggressive behavior in some situations when they're feeling defensive or when they're guarding something they value, or if they're feeling particularly fearful. But this is not a normal part of their communication with each other on a daily basis. Dogs are social animals, and they generally communicate with each other in a more non-confrontational, cooperative way. When it comes to conflict between dogs, it's not just about the physical altercation that occurs between dogs. Communication events happen before that, and when those events fail, that's what leads to altercation. As a general rule, when conflict does arise among dogs, they communicate with lots of body language that gradually progresses. They'll display more benign signals like licking their lips or yawning or trying to avoid whatever it is that's making them uncomfortable by simply walking away from it. And the aim of this type of body language is to create distance, to avoid confrontation with one another. They'll typically only escalate to more aggressive behaviors like growling, air snaps, or a bite if those early attempts to communicate failed to resolve the issue they were having. Many people will point to the instance of a mother dog snapping at a young puppy as an example for how to correct their own dogs. People will argue that using subtle, quick, or least aversive corrections, like a quick leash pop or a yell, is similar to a mother dog's gentle snap or sharp bark. And in some cases, this is how they justify using these aversive or punishing techniques. Look, while it is true that mothers may resort to physical corrections like that, as far as I know, it's a myth that this is a primary way that they communicate with their puppies. If a mother dog goes beyond those quick, subtle corrections, for example, if she's causing harm or actually biting her puppies, this is considered a major red flag amongst breeders and those who raise puppies. Typically, it means there's an external issue, like something medical, or possibly something in the mother dog's environment that's causing her to feel uncomfortable. Maybe she doesn't have a place to peacefully escape and get some time away from her puppies. Or maybe she's got a giant litter and she feels overworked and needs some additional support. But in a typical situation, a healthy and emotionally stable mother dog doesn't need to escalate to physical corrections with her puppies. Of course, there are instances where corrections can happen from a mother dog. Like with all dogs, that's a sign that communication has broken down. And those interactions represent a failure of communication, not a primary communication event. Aside from that, it's equally as likely that mother dogs are simply reacting to something they view as unpleasant, rather than trying to influence their puppy's future behavior through these corrections. This is interesting. I think we need to take a second to talk about something called ritualized aggression. Now we're going to get at the heart of what I think is going on here. When aggressive interactions do happen in nature, they're virtually always superficial and they don't result in serious injury or death most of the time. Now, I'm not talking about predator and prey relationships in nature, but we're talking about within the same species, conspecific. In animal behavior, the term for these type of measured reactions to one another, that's known as ritualized aggression. So scientists believe that this is a way for members of the same species to resolve conflicts without using more expensive tactics that would require the animal to use more energy or to have a higher risk of harm. Ritualized aggression between dogs is a highly evolved behavior and not something we should be trying to participate in. Trying to adapt that, especially when we know the consequences that go along with using aversive physical corrections, is currently not viewed as advantageous by the animal behavior community. Not a controversial statement. You might ask, why is it inappropriate to do this when we're training our dogs? It's inappropriate because we are really taking this concept way out of context when we try to apply it to dogs. The thing is, if you're raising a dog and you're training them, you must at all times be aware of their emotional state and how they're perceiving their environment. Wild canids, such as dogs and wolves, rarely resort to this physically punishing behavior when they interact with one another, and they only use it as a last resort when other attempts have failed. And this is what we see some dog trainers will often do. They'll say, look, I'm using this as a last resort because everything else has failed. However, as humans, we have a few advantages over dogs in some areas. We have the ability to critically evaluate situations and choose the most effective and humane training methods. We're able to use our higher cognitive functions such as reasoning, problem solving, and empathy, and discern the difference between intuition and science. If you're raising a dog and you're training them, you must at all times be aware of their emotional state and how they're perceiving their environment. Look, even if it was true that aversive interactions like this between dogs was a normal way of communication, it completely ignores the fact that domestic dogs have been specifically bred for thousands of years to take direction from human beings. I mean, dogs are such a unique species that have specifically evolved to have very intricate communication with people. To many people, it just seems crazy to them that you could teach a dog not to attack another dog without using aversive methods. But guess what? Not only is it possible, it seems to be the only viable way to address this issue in a responsible manner if you are a professional dog trainer. As we've established, using aversive methods when training dogs can certainly bring an immediate stop to some behavior. But it can, and this is true throughout the animal kingdom, lead to long-term welfare concerns and cause issues later in training. This is well documented. The number one side effect when using aversion with dogs like this is increased aggression. And the thing is, those same welfare concerns, those are not present when we attempt to address the dog's emotional state and use reinforcement methods and sensible management. Whatever the cause, there's a long history of humans using aversions with each other and with other animals to change behavior. But, and I ask you to fact check me on this and not just take my word for it, there is a scientific consensus that aversions are unnecessary to modify any animal's behavior. There are dozens of logical fallacies or errors in reasoning that are committed when one insists that aversions are sometimes necessary in dog training. So I would like to address two of these fallacies: that dogs communicate with each other in an aggressive manner sometimes, therefore we should use that as a basis to train dogs as people. We can cover more of these fallacies in the future that are often committed in our industry, if you'd like. Some people assume that things that happen in nature must be correct. That's called the naturalistic fallacy, which kind of applies here, even though it doesn't naturally happen in the way that many people think. Just because something happens in nature, that doesn't automatically mean that it's morally or ethically correct, or that it's the best way to move forward. The other common fallacy is begging the question, assuming something is true without having to prove it. Much like the alpha myth or dominance in dog training, like there are a lot of problems like that. We build on top of a flawed hypothesis, which is not ideal. Those who will double down on using aversives and defend the idea of using them are quick to say sometimes that, what about boundaries? You have to have aversion in dogs' life to teach them boundaries, to know what they can and cannot do. But as we've established in these last few videos, aversions are never necessary as part of a training or behavior modification plan. But saying you should avoid aversives is not the same thing as, oh, you should not provide boundaries to your dog. There are actually non-aversive ways to teach boundaries, as evidenced by the way that mother dogs actually interact with their puppies. One other bias that we should talk about is conservatism bias as well. Did you know that people are more likely to believe a first thing that they heard than they are a second thing that they heard, even if the second thing is right and the first thing is wrong? We're more likely to believe the thing we heard first. So it's kind of hard to overcome those biases. If you are part of the 17% of my audience who accepted this to be true, do you still maintain that it's true, or did you find this video persuasive in changing how you look at things? Let me know what you think and why, and get half off of your first PupBox at pupbox.com/Zak. I'll have a link in the description. Subscribe, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, get both of my books, and we'll see you next time.